Hi everyone, it's Moike, Swedish whiskey girl, and we are back with kind of a quirky whiskey. The first of its kind. It's an Outland Whisky is what they call it. So created by Richard Patterson in collaboration with Buas Gonzalez, which is a bodega in Jerez, which is where you get your sherries from. So this is a blended whiskey. It's made with over 30 different malts and grain whiskies from both the Highlands and Speyside here in Scotland, and they are between 5 and 8 years old. The blend of all of these whiskies together is then left for 3 years to mature in sherry casks in Speyside before you actually ship it over to Jerez in Spain to mature there a further year or even longer. So in Jerez they tried to mature it on both Oloroso, Fino and Pedro Jimenez sherry casks, but then when it came to choosing the final result they chose the PX casks, finished whiskies. So it's a very interesting one because you can't call this a Scotch whiskey even though all the whiskies are from Scotland, but because it hasn't been matured in Scotland for the entirety of its maturation, but it's spent some of its maturation time in Spain, you can't call it Scotch, so therefore it's an Outland whiskey. And don't you just love this bottle? It's massive, I can barely hold it in my hands, but it's yeah, quite stunning, and I like kind of all these glass details. It's also a really good price for this whiskey. It sits at below £30 for a full-size 70cl bottle. Yeah, let's do a review and then we'll see if you like these kind of flavors. I think that's a bargain, definitely. So it also sits at 41.3 ABV and definitely has a really rich sherry influence. So if you like sherry influenced whiskies, this might be a perfect one for you. Let's have a look on the nose. Yeah, it's sherry on the nose. It's those kind of alcoholic raisins that I get from Pedro Jimenez. Almost has kind of a grape vibe as well, so slightly wine-esque. It smells tropical, like tropical dried kind of plums and cherries. It reminds me of the intensity you would get from perhaps it reminds me of the intensity you would get from perhaps a Sauternes wine. So where you've left like the grapes to really use that sugars. So with Sauternes you use a noble rot grape, so they kind of scramble up and preserve all their sugars. So you get a really high concentration of these sugars in the grape. And you get this really strong, powerful, lovely flavor, and that's what this reminds me of. It's just an explosion of those absolutely lovely PX vibes. So Pedro Jimenez is of course one of the sweetest styles, if not the sweetest style of sherry, and if you drink pure Pedro Jimenez sherry, which is delicious, you should try it, especially if you like sherry matured whiskies. You'll see where the flavor comes from. But they have this high concentration of sugars in their grapes as well, because they leave them out to dry in the sun. So it's a really interesting way of making a sherry as well, and to me it just tastes like alcoholic raisins. So if you like raisins and alcohol, PX is for you. But let's see if we can find something else. Yeah, it's definitely sweet, and that kind of wine character in the grapes, like dark grapes, like purple grapes. It also smells juicy. Can't wait to have a taste. Slangema. So this to me is those raisin notes, and they're very elegant raisin notes. So sometimes when I chew a raisin they're quite sticky and quite chewy, but this is just like fresh, elegant raisins with alcohol of course as well. But it's definitely like, if you've tried PX, it is quite sticky and quite chewy as well, because it does have quite a thick consistency. But this just has that kind of whiskey elegance about it. It's of course a little bit thinner than PX is on the mouthfeel, which I do not mind at all. It just makes this a little bit easier to sip any day. PX is brilliant for like a hot day, quite cold. It's delicious all times, but sometimes I find it too sweet and too chewy, and I just want something that's a little bit lighter but still has these gorgeous flavors. Here you go. I mean, it's overwhelmingly raisins. I'm very sorry if you don't like raisins, but if you do, and there's a slight hint of like cinnamon as well. Along with that, I like a perfumey wine taste as well, like a red wine influence. And it's interesting because some of this whiskey has spent time maturing in Spain. There's a slight difference in the climate between Scotland or Spain, believe it or not. Because Spain has a hotter climate, it tends to kind of speed up the maturation in a way. I think it's good that you have kind of a shorter maturation time in Spain, so you don't get too much bitterness from the wood. I definitely don't get any bitterness on this, which is quite surprising considering it is that sherry influence. To me, it's just so fresh and like juicy and mouth-watering, instead of having this kind of bitter, slight bitterness that you sometimes recognize as like an oak bitterness or a black tea bitterness. But yeah, just very fresh. But of course, a hotter climate tends to give you more flavors from the oak quicker, which is why you'd sometimes find in places like Kentucky, where they make a lot of bourbon, that they have a very quick maturation. It might be just 2 to 5 years you have lots of flavor from the oak, which is of course because it's also new, but also because of that hotter climate. And in Scotland you tend to find this kind of slower maturation that gives you a little bit more of those elegant flavors instead of these kind of powerful sweet notes that are coming out quite quickly. So yeah, you do that. I mean, if you tried sherry, you get these kind of juicy notes because of the heat as well, and I do think that kind of transfers into this as well. For under £30, I am so amazed that this is a thing. And I mean, for me who loves absolutely like quirky whiskies and when you've done something different, don't get me wrong, I love the classic whiskies and I'm so happy there's a rich history in, for example, Scotch whiskey and Irish whiskey and bourbon, and these really classic ones that you've worked with for hundreds of years. But I'm also so fascinated about flavour that these quirky new whiskies just makes me so curious and so intrigued to find out what they're like, and this is definitely one of those that I just picked up from Royal Mile Whiskies here in Edinburgh as kind of a, oh, I've heard of this, and then I looked at the price and I was like, this is right. And I was like, okay, well, for £30 I can buy that. So I just picked it up on my way home from work, and as you can see, it's one of the bottles that we've nearly finished in about a year, which doesn't really happen here. We have too many open bottles on the shelves, but we're working on it, and I don't think this lockdown situation, well, the lockdown situation is great for the shelf situation, maybe less so for our alcohol consumption. But I'm not complaining, especially when it's this delicious. If you like sherry, if you like Pedro Jimenez, if you like raisins, if you like whiskies with sherry influence, you should try this. Yeah, it's something else. And do you know what I think would be really interesting? Trying this next to Pedro Jimenez sherry, just to see where those flavors come from, where the differences are. I find this slightly more elegant, slightly more crisp, and slightly more, of course, whiskey-like, but that kind of whiskey elegance with the kind of more velvety feel to it, where Pedro Jimenez is more chewy, sticky, sweet, just gorgeous in those ways. So kind of comparing those two would be really interesting as well. And I think when you're looking for flavour in whiskies, knowing where the flavours come from and how to identify them, I mean, it's a work in progress. I'm still working on it, and some days are better than others to identify things, and sometimes I know something and I'm like, that's exactly what I got in that whiskey, and I just didn't think of it because I didn't know what it was like. So I do think that's an interesting way of doing it. I would love to hear from you if you've tried the Nomad, if you're curious about the Nomad, if you have any questions, and I'll try my best to answer them. Yeah, as always, have a lovely day. Slán Skål!